Hello and welcome back to another episode of Handloader TV with me, your host, Jeremiah. We have an exciting episode packed full of all sorts of good stuff for you. We have some factory ammunition here, we have hand loads that we're going to test, we have two rifles here that we're going to provide an overall performance evaluation on. I've had these rifles for a long time and spent a lot of time in the field and used them heavily. So I'm pretty excited to work up loads for them, test some factory ammo, and present to you the results. The cartridge that we're going to be using is the 223 Remington or the 5.56 Nato, and we'll dive into the nuts and bolts on that in a moment, don't worry. But the 223 Remington cartridge was developed around 1964, and the concept for the cartridge came about from Eugene Stoner's M16 rifle. And that's really where the concept for this cartridge is born. The parent case is the 222 Remington cartridge, and it has seen widespread use among varmint shooters, competitive shooters, and folks just plinking away on a Sunday afternoon. In addition to that, it's one of the longest serving military cartridges that the United States military has officially adopted and used. It's been around the world, it has been in use for a very long time, and it has a very long reputation of service in many different fields. So overall, an outstanding cartridge and extremely popular in the United States and even other countries abroad. Which kind of brings us to the question that I want to answer and hopefully provide some clarification on, and that is the differences between 223 Remington and 5.56 Nato. And I think I have some interesting insights that I can add to the overall discussion and hopefully clear up some myths and misconceptions, because it seems like for as many people try to explain it, they never get it quite right. Let's dive into that. So taking a look at just the facts when comparing the 223 Remington to the 5.56 Nato, what I have here is a 223 Remington. It's head stamped as such, and then I have a 5.56 Nato, which is also stamped as such. This is loaded by Black Hills ammunition, this is loaded by Winchester ammunition. Externally speaking, when looking at the cartridge, there is no difference in the dimensions. You could take calipers out and you could measure them. The only variation that you're going to find is from different manufacturers and probably lot-to-lot variation in the ammunition. Externally speaking, the 223 Remington and the 5.56 Nato are identical. And that's an important thing to take note of, and something that a lot of people fail to understand. The real difference comes down to the standards that have been set forth by various organizations, SAMI, CIP, and NATO. And we'll take a deep dive into that in just a moment. However, the 223 Remington has been around for a long time, and it's seen a lot of change since its start in 1964, twist rates, projectile design, and all those kinds of things. So the pressure, probably based off its parent case, the 222 Remington, by SAMI was set at 55,000 psi. Now if you look at CIP and their pressure standards for 223 Remington, it's set at around 62,366 psi, give or take. So a very different pressure standard from two different organizations. It's also important to note that they do not pressure test using the same methods. Their methods are slightly different. Therefore, you get some slightly different results. And that's also a great point of confusion among people. Now, the 5.56 Nato was standardized in 1981 by the STANAG 4172, and that birthed the 5.56 Nato so that it could be standardized for use around the world in other NATO countries. And it really is a great standardization, and there's a lot of good that came out of that. And in that standardization, the pressure standard for NATO is set at about 60,916 psi roughly. So you have CIP at 62,000, you have NATO around 61,000, and you have SAMI at 55,000. So the pressure standards vary quite a bit between SAMI and the other two. An interesting note. The only real difference between 223 Remington and 5.56 Nato is in the lead, in the chamber there. And that's really where a lot of people get confused. Most modern firearms can handle the 62,000 psi mark. The only time you can really run into issues with a 223 Remington, the true original chamber, is if these long, heavy, higher BC bullets get jammed into the rifling. That can increase your chamber pressure, and it could potentially push it over into dangerous levels. So the difference in chamber could be a contributing factor to overpressure. And having that 223 Remington at 55,000 PSI, still you're going to be relatively safe, but it could happen in that specific chamber. Now, if you roll along a few years, you'll find out that chambers have changed over the years. In fact, these two rifles that we have before us are chambered in 223 Wild. And that's kind of a hybrid chamber between 223 Remington, the original chamber, and 5.56 Nato with that longer lead to ensure that these longer armor-piercing and heavier, higher BC bullets don't jam into the lands and increase your chamber pressure. So there's been a few changes and a lot of modernization since the introduction of the 223 Remington, and today most 223 Remington chambered rifles, you're able to shoot these longer, heavier, higher BC bullets with a few exceptions. It really just depends on the projectile you're using and so on and so forth. So for our testing today, what I want to point out is that we will be keeping all of our loads at 62,000 PSI chamber pressure or less. Some of them are going to be significantly less, but we're not going to exceed 62,000 PSI. So this would be considered a 5.56 NATO standard or a CIP standard. We're not going with the SAMI pressure specifications because we have rifles that can easily handle that 62,000 PSI mark. Another thing I want to point out in differences is the 223 is such a widely prolific cartridge used by so many different people, manufactured by so many different companies. There is a lot of variation between head stamps and different manufacturers. So if accuracy is your goal, I would highly encourage you guys to sort your brass by head stamp, make sure they all match, and that will provide the maximum accuracy because there is enough variation in case manufacturing to change how much capacity there is for powder internally in that case, and that can significantly vary the pressures you're loading to. If you have a Winchester case that has very little case capacity and then you have a Norma case that has a lot of case capacity and you load those two with the same powder charge, you're going to have widely different velocities and widely different pressures. So just something to keep in mind. I also recently interviewed a hunter pilot of Starline Brass at SHOT Show, and he had some very interesting things to say about the differences between their 223 Remington brass and their 5.56 NATO brass. And essentially the primary difference between the two is the 5.56 brass is a little bit thicker. And that is something you'll commonly see in Lake City brass and other cases like that that were used for the military. But there you have it. That's the most simple explanation I can give to you on the difference between these two cartridges. If you'd like further information, a while back we helped Western Powders publish their reloading guide. I would highly encourage you guys to check that out. Flip over to the 223 Remington and the 5.56 NATO chapters in there, and they give a really good, brief, easy to read description clarifying the differences between the two cartridges. That was a great manual that we had the privilege to work with them on and publish for them, and it's packed full of good information, so be sure to check that out. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look at the rifles that we'll be testing and evaluating. Our two test platforms that we have are pretty interesting and probably very common to the 223 Remington 5.56 NATO cartridges. The first one that I want to talk about here, starting out at the back here, this is a one-piece polymer lower. And it's the What Would Stoner Do rifle lower that you can get through Brownells. Ian McCullum of Forgotten Weapons and Carl Casarda of InRange TV put a lot of work into this and bringing this into market. And personally, I'm a big fan of light ARs. I do not like heavy ARs, especially for what I do, a lot of varmint hunting and predator calling and that sort of thing. And I spend a lot of time walking with these things in the field, so a lightweight AR really appealed to me. So we have the KE Arms one-piece polymer lower, and there's some interesting aspects to this. The biggest thing I want to point out right off the bat before we dive into it is lightweight. It's very durable, very solid, very rugged construction, but the safety selector on here requires a special safety selector that allows you to turn it halfway between safe and fire, and then you can pull the safety selector out. If you use a standard spring and detent one in there, Once you put that in, it's never coming out again. So if you want to put a drop-in trigger later on or something like that, you're essentially going to have to cut out that spring and detent, and you could potentially ruin your lower. So make sure you install the correct safety selector from the beginning if you're building this from the ground up. Overall, I really like the lightweight one-piece design on this. I like the A1 style length of pull on this guy. It feels very comfortable. It's good if you're running a chest rig or something like that. Very, very comfortable overall. I have a Dave Fink's Custom Gunsmithing ambidextrous charging handle on here, and I have a little bit of a flare on the mag well here. The trigger on here is just a mil-spec trigger that I honed down using a stone, kind of cleaned it up a little bit. On an average of 5 pulls on the Wheeler Engineering trigger pull gauge, this trigger broke fairly clean and crisp at 5 pounds 13 ounces. It is a little bit heavier than I would like. It didn't get it down quite to the poundage I wanted, but as far as smoothness goes, and we are clear here, checked multiple times. As far as smoothness goes, I'll use my left hand so you can kind of see. It's heavy, but there's no creep. A little bit of take up there, and then it just kind of breaks. You get a little bit of creep, but a solid wall that it hits, no over travel. Overall, not a great trigger, but not a bad trigger. Moving along here, we have an Aero Precision upper receiver, and this particular one does not have the forward assist. That would be correct with Ian and Carl's What Would Stoner Do rifle concept. They removed the forward assist there to save weight. Personally, I regret that decision now. I prefer having the forward assist there, especially for what I do. It's very nice if I want to drop the bolt quietly, forward assisted into battery while I'm on a coyote stand or something like that. I'm doing some night hunting in Texas or something along those lines. I do wish this had a forward assist, but that would be relatively easy to swap out. Rolling along here, we have the Faxon 18-inch carbon fiber handguard. I really like these things. These are very lightweight, very ergonomic, very comfortable, and it's proven itself to be rugged and reliable across many hunting trips, riding around in the truck as a truck gun, and lots of field use throughout the years. I've had both these rifles for over a year now and spent a lot of time in the field with them. The barrel is a Proof Research carbon fiber wrapped barrel. This one is 20 inches, 1 1/8 twist rate, same twist rate as the other rifle here, which we'll get into. We have a Superlative Arms adjustable gas block here, and we're using the gas tube that Proof supplied with the barrel. Very nice barrels, very lightweight, and this is where I differ again from Ian and Carl's build. They went with a Faxon, I believe it was a pencil profile barrel. I wanted something that was very accurate, very reliable. I like shooting very small groups. Again, I do a lot of varmint hunting with these rifles, so small groups is critical. And in doing all my testing and shooting, you'll see it. I haven't seen any point of impact shift. I haven't seen any reason not to go with the carbon fiber. And it really kind of sticks with the polymer lower theme, the Faxon carbon fiber handguard. It just made a whole lot of sense to me to go with the Proof Research barrel. Affixed on the end, which we'll conduct all our testing with, this is an AAC 762 SD suppressor that is resto modded. So what happened is I actually used this same suppressor, same serial number, in our 300 blackout video, and it performed very well. Really liked the suppressor, and using it in further testing and later on I eventually had a baffle strike with it, and I sent it back to the new AAC and paid for them to do what they call a resto mod on it. They take the old 762 SD and basically restore it, make it brand new, same serial number so you don't have to go through the paperwork again, and they rebuild your suppressor. So this is their resto mod AAC 762 SD suppressor. A very nice can. I've been very impressed with the performance of it this far, and I'm really excited to work up some loads with this attached because I do intend for both of these rifles to be shot primarily suppressed. Finally, to top everything off, in our Leupold AR mount here, we have a tracked Torek Ultra HD scope. It's a 4 to 20 by 50 millimeter scope. It features very nice locking turrets on the windage and elevation. Pop them up and you can dial in your elevation to whatever you desire. It has an illuminated reticle and adjustable parallax on that as well. 30mm main tube on this guy. I've used this scope a ton in the field, and so far I've been really impressed with its performance. Taking it out shooting long range with it, and the reticle in there is really nice, easy to use. MOA reticle, matches the turrets. Just a really solid scope option, and it kind of matches. I like the gray there, kind of blends in with the carbon fiber theme I've got going on here on the upper part of this rifle. Very nice optic. Next up, I want to swap gears here, and we'll swap over to the other rifle. This is actually not my rifle, hence the pink accents on it, but this was a wedding present for my wife, and it's a dandy little carbine. So we have the same KE Arms one-piece monolithic lower that was used on the What Would Stoner Do rifle, and same Dave Fink ambidextrous customized charging handle there. And inside here we have a Timney competition AR-15 trigger, which broke cleanly and crisply at 2 pounds 10 ounces. Very nice, no over travel, no creep, just fantastic trigger on this guy. And we have an Aero Precision upper receiver that does feature the forward assist there. Same Faxon carbon fiber handguard, but it's a little bit shorter. This is a 15-inch handguard compared to the 18-inch on the other guy. Same Proof Research manufactured barrel, but instead of 20 inches in length, this one's 16, both are 1 1/8 twist again. And then to top it off, we have a Leupold Patrol 6 HD scope here. It's a 1:6 by 24 optic, and it is illuminated, and features a very nice reticle in there as well for holding over at various ranges and winds and even moving targets. It features their CDS ZL2 turrets, which I really like. You can zero it, lock it in, very rugged and robust, and you can ensure that your elevation turret doesn't move, but you push this button here and it releases it so you can dial in your elevation. Very nice feature there. The side cap here is a cap turret, so you won't accidentally rotate that while the rifle is riding around in the truck or something like that. And as you can see, this rifle has seen quite a bit of use as well. Dave Fink over at Fink's Custom Gunsmithing did all the Cerakote work on this guy, and he really did just an absolutely fantastic job. And these polymer lower receivers can be a little bit tricky to Cerakote, and he just did a fantastic job. Even put in Cerakote our wedding date on there. So very cool, very sentimental rifle for me and for my wife. We've had these both out in the field quite a bit. The performance has been fantastic thus far, but don't take my word for it. Let's go ahead and jump on over to the hand loading side of things. And then we can take these things onto the range and shoot them. So when it came time to hand load for these two rifles here in the 5.56 Nato or 223 Remington cartridges, what we went ahead and did is selected our components. So for our dies, we're using Redding dies. This is just their basic 2-die set. Has a full-length sizing die and then a bullet seating die with a built-in crimp function. Now I did remove the standard seating stem plug here, and I replaced it with a VLD micrometer adjustable seating stem. Just makes it really easy for dialing in the overall loaded lengths, especially when you're working with multiple different projectiles or seating to different overall loaded lengths. Then we went ahead and selected Starline cases for all of our brass needs. These are brand new unfired Starline cases. I've found their quality to be exceptional, and these cases are in fact marked 5.56. Starline sells 223 Remington and 5.56 cases. The 5.56 cases are a little bit thicker, and discussing stuff with their ballistician, they just seem to work a little bit better in the AR-15s. They get less dinged up, and they're able to withstand those more higher pressures and the abuse in a semi-automatic platform. So I'm looking forward to testing these and seeing what kind of results we get with them. Then we have some high quality powders here selected. We'll be using CCI number 400 primers. These are small rifle primers for all of our testing. And we also have some high quality projectiles selected here, Sierra, Hornady, and Berger bullets, in addition to the gauntlet of factory ammunition that we're going to put to the test. Now, before I jump in and walk you through here on the hand loading stuff, one thing I need to mention is we are going to be testing a lot more than just what you see here on the table. As a matter of fact, I already have 400 rounds preloaded with different powder charges, bullet weights, and various powders. So we're going to really run these rifles through the gauntlet, see how they perform overall. But for video time's sake, rather than show you all of that, which would probably make for a 24-hour long video, we're going to show you the best result. However, if you want to see the entirety of our testing, I would highly encourage you guys to head on over to loaddata.com, our sister website. Check it out over there. You'll be able to see all the bullets we used, all the different powders and charge weights. You'll even be able to see the velocities that we got. The only thing you won't be able to see is the charge weight. We reserve that for subscribers to loaddata.com, and it really is a great way for you guys to get access to that information by subscribing. It supports the channel and all the testing that we conduct here at Wolf Publishing Company and Handloader TV. So be sure to check that out. Now, rather than walk you through step by step every little detail I did to hand load for this cartridge, I want to summarize it in words for you and do a few demonstrations. So starting out with the new unfired Starline cases, I simply put a little bit of this Hornady Unique case lube simply right around the neck and a little bit on the inside of the neck, wiping it in there. And then I had this die adjusted to where it would barely touch the shoulder of the case. And what I'm really looking to do is just iron out any dings or dents in the case mouth there. Run it up into the press like so, and there it's ready to go. And then that process would just repeat, of course, for over 500 rounds of 500 cases that I was working with. Once the sizing operation is complete, I would then go ahead and take my brass and I would put a slight chamfer and deburr on the case mouth. And then for that I used a Frankfurt Arsenal case prep center. Just speeds things right along. Then I went ahead and took a Frankfurt Arsenal hand primer here. This is a great tool. You can prime very quickly and efficiently. There's no primers in here, but you simply slip the case in, squeeze the handle. It's a very simple and straightforward operation, and I feel it's a little bit faster than priming on the press, and it also doesn't restrict me to working at the bench. From there, it was time to charge our cases. For that, we used an RCBS Matchmaster powder dispenser, and all charges were accurate to 0.04 of a grain. From there, once the cases were primed and charged, they go back over here to the press, rotate the press head to our bullet seating die, and I would take a bullet, seat it using this Redding seating die, and there you have it. There is a dummy round that we loaded of 223 Remington. So on that note, the ammunition is already preloaded, and I think it's time to go hit the range and see what these rifles are truly capable of. So we're out on our usual 100-yard range. The target's down there at 100 yards. Ailer Model 35P chronograph set up 10 feet from the muzzle to record all of our velocities. And according to my Kestrel 5700 here, we're dealing with some wind, about 7 to 10 miles per hour, blowing from the 9 o'clock position. And the temperature is 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity is 16.6% and pressure is 25.24 in Hg. Dealing with a little bit of wind, but hopefully we'll be able to muddle through and get some good groups on paper. Next ammunition that we're going to be trying is this Nosler ballistic tip varmint in 223 Remington with a 55 grain ballistic tip varmint bullet on it. 100 yards to the target. We'll see if we can put a small group on the paper. Rolling along with our Winchester theme, it's simply the ammunition that was available at the time. This is the Winchester Silver Tip 64 grain projectile on this guy. I'm going to go ahead, put it to the test in this rifle. Settle in, group on the paper. I'm going to test out some special stuff here. This is Black Hills Ammunition 5.56 Special Ball LR, also known as Mark 262 Mod 1C, featuring a 77 grain Sierra OTM or Match King bullet. We're going to see how this performs through this rifle. The next load that we're going to try is using Vitavori N135 powder, a 26.8 grain charge with a 55 grain Hornady VMAX bullet. Starline cases marked 5.56, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.250 inches. Drop the bolt, settle in, shoot a group. Up next to the plate is Accurate 2230 powder, a 23.4 grain charge with a 70 grain Berger VLD target bullet. Starline cases marked 5.56, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.255 inches. This should be pretty close to a max load, so use caution. when working up your loads to this powder charge. Settle in, shoot a group. That's kind of something I've seen with this particular powder. It tends to like to be run hot. In the 223 or 5.56 Nato is really the pressure level we're loading for. So we're back over to Hodgdon H4895 powder, a 21.5 grain charge, but this time with a 77 grain Sierra Hollow Point boat tail or Match King bullet, Starline cases marked 5.56, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.255 inches. Next up with the 16-inch gun, we've got an Osler 55 grain ballistic tip varmint ammunition, 223 Remington. Put a group on a paper. Now we've got the 16-inch gun benched in, and we're gonna start out by testing some factory ammunition. This is Winchester Silver Tip Defense, a 64 grain defense tip projectile. We're gonna go ahead and see what kind of accuracy and velocities we get out of this 16-inch gun. So what we have here is a very special ammunition. This is 5.56 Special Ball LR, also known as Mark 262. This is the Mod 1C from Black Hills Ammunition, featuring a 77 grain OTM projectile from Sierra. Let's go ahead and see what kind of groups we can get on the paper. Next up, we've got Vitavorian 135 powder, a 26.3 grain charge with a 55 grain Hornady VMAX bullet. Starline cases marked 556, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.250 inches. Next up at the bench, we're using Accurate 2230 powder, a 23.4 grain charge with a 70 grain Berger VLD target bullet, Starline 556 cases, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.255 inches. This is a maximum charge, so use caution and work slowly up to this charge weight. Rifle's benched in, and we got really good accuracy out of this particular load in the 20-inch rifle, so let's see if we can get the same out of this 16. This is a cold bore shot, so let's see what happens. We've gone ahead and swapped over to H. Hodgdon H4895, a 21.5 grain charge with the 77 grain Sierra Hollow Point Boat Tail or Match King bullet, Starline 556 cases, CCI 400 primers, and our overall loaded length is 2.255 inches. Benched in. Rock and roll. So as you can see, we're back at the bench now after testing a ton of different types of ammunition, different hand loads, different projectiles, all kinds of stuff. And what we have compiled for you in this target review session is the best and most accurate loads that were fired in both the 20-inch barreled rifle and the 16-inch barreled rifle. These loads proved to shoot pretty consistently and provide good accuracy in both the rifles. I'd like to invite you, if you haven't already, check out loaddata.com. Be sure to look for the Handloader TV 556 loads so you can follow along and see just how many different loads we tested. But without further ado, let's dive into the first results, starting out with the factory ammunition. This is Nosler 223 Remington. This is their ballistic tip varmint using a 55 grain projectile. And from the 20-inch barreled rifle, we got a group size of 0.8 inches. And with the 16-inch barreled rifle, we got a group size of 0.78 inches. Decent standard deviations and extreme spreads, and pretty good velocity. Now, one thing that is really cool about the testing we're conducting here, shooting both of these rifles on the same day using the same ammunition or the same load, we get a really good comparison to the differences in velocity between the 16-inch barreled rifle and the 20-inch barreled rifle. So with this Nosler ammunition and the difference in barrel length, there was a total of 134 feet per second difference. Not quite as much as I would have expected, but a decent number there. Moving along, the next factory ammunition that we tested was this Winchester Silver Tip personal defense ammunition using a 64 grain Winchester Silver Tip projectile. With the 20-inch barreled rifle, we got a group size of 1.08 inches, and with the 16-inch barreled rifle, we got a group size of 1.16 inches. Now, it was not easy to hold group sizes this small with the 1:6 optic on there. However, I did feel like as time went on and with practice, I was able to get pretty good and consistent group sizes. While the 20 power optic definitely has an advantage over the 6 power optic, they still shot pretty comparable group sizes, which I think is really interesting and a testament to the quality of both optics and both rifles, in particular the barrels. Because these are two completely different barrels, same manufacturer, but they're different lengths, same twist rate, but they were made at different times as well. So very interesting results there with the Winchester. We had a total velocity difference of 97 feet per second and very comparable extreme spreads and standard deviations. Now, the next ammunition that we tested was this stuff right here. This is Black Hills Mark 262 Mod 1C ammunition. This uses a 77 grain Sierra OTM or Match King bullet, loaded in Lake City cases. And with the 20-inch barreled gun, we got a group size of 0.45 inches. With the 16-inch barreled gun, we got a group size of 0.59 inches. Standard deviations and extreme spreads were very comparable. The extreme spread was within 10 feet per second of each other, and the average velocity difference between the two rifles was 124 feet per second. So overall, very good results, and this ammunition, this Mark 262 Mod 1 that Black Hills loads, is really what I use as a factory ammunition benchmark for testing for accuracy and velocity and consistency. It is just absolutely fantastic ammunition. Well, we did have some individual group sizes that exceeded or outperformed the Black Hills. It was really tailored to that rifle. It was either done in the 16-inch barreled rifle or it was done in the 20-inch barreled rifle, and it didn't do it across the board. So the fact that they are able to produce such accurate and consistent ammunition is quite impressive. Now, jumping on over to the hand loading side of things, we used Vitavori N135 powder, a 26.3 grain charge here, to work up our loads in both these rifles. And we got a group size with the 20-inch gun of 0.76 with the flyer. If you discount that one flyer, it measures out to 0.35 inches. Very good. I don't think that flyer was on me. Maybe it was a cold bore shot. I can't quite remember at this point. You can go back and review the footage. But overall, a really good group, even with the flyer. And in the 16-inch gun, we got a group size of 0.71 inches. So if nothing else, it's not consistent. And we got a little bit better standard deviations and extreme spreads with the 20-inch gun, but we also had a malfunction in the 16-inch gun with this load, if I'm recalling correctly. And we'll address that at the end of this segment, because we did come to a realization as to why the rifle was malfunctioning, because both of these rifles do feature superlative arms adjustable gas blocks, and they were tuned prior to testing. The next load we went ahead and tried is Accurate 2230 powder, a great powder for a personal favorite of mine. This is a 23.4 grain charge, so it is a max load to 5.56 pressures. It's something to take note. We got a group size of 0.63 inches with the 20-inch gun and a group size of 0.93 with the 16-inch gun. And this is something I've noticed in testing this powder with different projectiles, different bullets, and different guns. I've noticed that this powder tends to like that maximum charge range, good high case fill. I think that has to do with the bulk density of this powder in order to get these extreme spreads consistent and across the board. The extreme spread in the 16-inch and 20-inch gun only varied by 1 foot per second. They had the same standard deviation, which I find extremely impressive. And the velocity difference between the 16-inch barreled gun and the 20-inch barreled gun was 113 feet per second. So overall, good performance. The final load that we're going to showcase for you in this video is Hodgdon H4895 powder, a 21.5 grain charge. This is 223 Remington pressure. This is less than 55,000 PSI. So you have a lot of room to work up with this powder. But this was the most consistent overall load that we tested with this powder between the two rifles, using a 77 grain Sierra Match King bullet. We got a group size of 0.64 inches with the 20-inch barreled rifle and a group size of 0.65 with the 16-inch barreled rifle, and a total velocity difference of 111 feet per second. So there you have it. All the results that we are showing to you in this video. If you want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything we tested in these rifles, again, loaddata.com. Don't forget to check it out. But overall, the rifles performed very well. And I'm extremely impressed with the accuracy that we were able to achieve with the factory ammunition and the hand loads as well. And I truly think that's a testament to the quality of these proof research carbon fiber wrapped barrels. We've had a lot of them on this channel over the course of many years, and we've had a lot of them tested in the magazines, and they just always seem to perform very, very well. And it really caters itself to this lightweight AR-15 platform that we're working with here in these two builds. So that's all the hand loads. Let's go ahead and close out this video with some final thoughts and an overall evaluation. So starting out with our cartridges, the 223 Remington or the 5.56 Nato cartridge, there's no question there. They're great cartridges for the applications that most people use them for. They're more than capable of harvesting medium-sized game such as white-tailed deer, even mule deer with proper shot placement, proper bullet construction at reasonable ranges. They're a great cartridge capable of great accuracy, and there's no question there. I mean, these have been talked about for a very long time, and they have a long-standing reputation. Now, what doesn't have a long-standing reputation is the two rifles that we have before us. They're using a lot of relatively new materials, this polymer one-piece lower receiver, carbon fiber handguards, carbon fiber wrapped barrels. There's a lot that went into these rifles. And up front, right off the bat, the first thing that I want to mention is that the bolt carrier group in the 16-inch gun, with the gas system properly tuned, eventually, after about 200 rounds, it had a failure and it started leaking gas and it wasn't cycling the firearm properly. You can probably notice that if you go back and review some of the footage and compare the ejection pattern of the 16-inch gun to the 20-inch gun, it was just weak. Now, some of that could be also the extractor or ejector starting to fail, but I don't think so. And none of the loads that we tested were over 62,000 PSI. So I just think this bolt carrier group had a premature failure. And what I did to confirm this was I took the bolt carrier group out of the 20-inch barreled rifle, and it ran flawlessly, no changing to the gas settings, no issues whatsoever. And the bolt carrier in the 20-inch gun is a B&T Systems, and it's a pretty neat bolt carrier. They have a speed cut in here as well, which is pretty neat. If I go ahead and pop up this 20-inch barreled rifle here, there's a reason for this cut in the bolt carrier group, and it's a very smart design, because what it allows you to do is seat a fully loaded 30-round magazine easier. Now, of course, I don't have a fully loaded 30-round magazine here. You can see how filthy these guns are after all the testing we conducted. But it really is a breeze to insert the magazine into this rifle. It does make a difference. If you haven't heard of them before or checked them out, I'd encourage you guys. B&T Systems, they make a great bolt carrier, and it ran perfectly reliable, unlike this one. So overall, the rifles performed very well. I was very impressed with the heat mitigation on these carbon fiber barrels. The handguards performed very well. I did do some off-camera testing with them, dumping 30-round magazines and then going and shooting a 5-shot group before and after that 30-round mag dump. They seemed to hold their zero very well. It didn't shift with barrel heat, and overall performance, I think, was very good. One thing I might have forgotten to mention is the 16-inch barreled rifle in its current configuration without the suppressor weighs 6 pounds 13 ounces, a very light and handy carbine. The 20-inch rifle weighs a little bit more without the suppressor. It weighs 8 pounds 2 ounces, but it's also got a lot larger optic on it. And with the suppressor itself weighs 1 pound 3 ounces. So overall, these rifles are extremely light. They're great to carry in the field. I've spent a lot of time coyote calling and hunting with them. They've done very well for me. They're comfortable. And overall, just a great rifle in and of itself. I've been impressed. The only little gripe I have with it is the lower receiver and that safety thing. If you put the traditional style safety on there, you're going to have to cut out that spring and detent in there. But if you're not building ARs and you're not swapping parts as much as I am, it's really not a problem. They hold up well and perform well. The overall accuracy, I think, was very impressive. And for not being marketed as a precision suppressor, it didn't seem to hurt the accuracy at all in our testing. So there you have it. You can see the results for yourself, and now you can make educated decisions on whether this is something you would be interested in or not. And you have some good hand load information and some good reference for factory ammunition as well. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this rather long episode of Handloader TV. We greatly appreciate it. As always, if you have any questions, be sure to leave those in the comments section below. I do my best to read and respond to every one of those. Sometimes it takes me a while to get around to that as the channel grows, but I really do my best to try and answer those. So thank you so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. Be sure to give us a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified when we post our next video. We have a lot of exciting content coming up, some more in-house stuff on products and reviews of that nature, in addition to plenty more load development in the works. So until next time, I will catch you guys in the next episode.